engineer it to make the sedan, because I just think the wagons across the entire Volkswagen Group range just look fantastic. Skoda Superb, Volkswagen Arteon and Passat, Skoda Octavia, and all of the RS wagons. They just nail the looks. However, I personally do have an issue with the post-update cars, and this is a hard one to say because it is fundamentally a very handsome vehicle, but with the post-update, the gap at the leading edge of the bonnet, it just looks like a dodgy panel gap, and then all the details around the intakes down at the side there, it's all just a bit too busy and looks a bit cheap and stuck on. I think that the pre-update is the more handsome looking car. What do you think? However, it also does help that this is one of the rarer black edition models, so it features all of the S-Line trim kit, and it just, I love the way this thing looks. And you know what? The same can be said for the interior, but come on, it's an Audi. Of course the interior is going to look fantastic. But let's give you the bad news first. What goes wrong with the interior? First of all, it's electronic gremlins, specifically with early versions of the virtual cockpit and the MMI screen. Owners have reported that the screens can flicker or even reboot while driving. If they do this, this is a pretty good sign that the whole system might crash really soon, so yeah, get it seen to ASAP. Also, just press every button and function in here and make sure it all works. Look, chances are it will, but if it doesn't, it might be a sign that there are some water ingress issues. Again, that can be a complete nightmare. I can't say this strongly enough. If certain buttons don't work, do not buy that car. There's going to be another A4 down the road. Now, one of the functions that you are obviously going to try out is the gear lever, but here's a fun fact. It's not actually a gear lever. This is not attached to the gearbox or transmission in any way, shape or form. It's purely an electronic switch, but the problem with that is some owners have had issues where the electronic switch fails, and that means you can't select a gear. Now, some other owners have claimed that when you turn the car off and on, that will reset it, and then all of a sudden it works. But other owners haven't been quite as lucky, and the only way the car's moving is if it's dragged onto the back of a tow truck. Next up, a few owners mentioned that they were a bit disappointed with the quality of the leather, and that the leather can wear prematurely, especially on the outer bolsters of the front seats. Actually, just expanding on that, maybe the most common complaint we found amongst the owners groups and forums was just owners being really disappointed with poor interior quality. Now, not so much in the materials used, because everything you touch does feel very, very premium, and the seating position and ergonomics, typical for Audi, absolutely spot on. And obviously the overall design is absolutely top notch, but owners have just been complaining that the interiors can get a bit rattly and noisy and squeaky, like they've just used really cheap plastics everywhere. I don't mean cheap plastics as far as, again, the things you touch, they all feel great, but behind the scenes, behind all of this theatre, I think there's some cheap stuff going on. Also, apparently these interiors aren't the most resilient. Owners with kids have reported that they just don't handle abuse at all well, which is interesting because that's something that the Genesis G70 is actually quite good at, and it feels easily